There's a secret to leadership that separates great leaders from the rest. And it's not what most people think. And yet, once you know it, I guarantee you will never look back. In today's video, we're going to dive into a little known leadership gold mine that can elevate your game to new heights. And quite frankly, you can't master leadership until you master this. All right, before we jump in, let me introduce myself. I'm Zach White, and I've been a leader in the social sector for almost 15 years. And when I first started, I had no idea what I was doing. So I decided to become a student of leadership. And I made plenty of mistakes over the last 15 years of that journey, but I've managed to learn some really valuable lessons along the way that have really changed the game for me. What I've learned is that the world needs great leaders, and you can sit around hoping somebody will take on that responsibility, or you can take on that responsibility yourself. What if you are the leader the world desperately needs? That's why I started this leadership community. I want to provide you with all the support you need to develop your full leadership potential and give you the motivation and encouragement you need to fight the good fight day in, day out. Okay, with that said, let's dive into today's content. So, what is the secret to leadership that separates great leaders from the rest? What is this little known leadership gold mine that can elevate your game to new heights? I'm going to tell you, all right? You ready? Humility. Humility. That is the secret weapon to your leadership potential. And I'm convinced that you cannot call yourself a leader if you don't have humility. You can feel free to call yourself a dictator, a boss, a manager, a supervisor, a coach, but not a leader. You can't truly lead people without humility. The depth of your humility will determine the depth of your leadership. They go hand in hand. I'm going to repeat that. The depth of your humility will determine the depth of your leadership. The greater your humility, the higher your leadership potential is. Now, before we go any further, let's break down what humility is at its core. I love C.S. Lewis's definition of humility. He says, humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. In other words, humility is not about putting yourself down or having low self-esteem or a lack of confidence. Humility means that you aren't so fixated on yourself that you can actually see the wisdom and skill in others. Humility means you have an openness to learning from others. Humility means having respect for other people and thinking more about them than yourself. That's humility. Now, let's talk about what humility does for your leadership, because there's so much there. I'm going to give you 5 crucial reasons why humility is unbelievably powerful and why it's going to revolutionize the way you think about leadership. Here's number 1. You ready? Humility promotes learning. Humility promotes learning. If you lead with pride, then you have a very, very limited pool of people to learn from. You're only going to learn from people who are ahead of you in some area that you respect, or, there's something they did or accomplished that's why you want to learn from them. That can work for a while, but as things grow, or your organization or whatever you lead grows, your available mentors are going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and you are going to learn less and less and less, and it's just not going to work. Not to mention, the educational diet you've limited yourself to is extremely anemic. The vibrancy of your leadership is going to be severely limited, and your ceiling, your leadership potential, is going to be really, really low, lower than you probably realize. And on the flip side, if you have humility, then you can learn from anyone. Anyone. It doesn't matter who they are, what they do, where they are in the organizational chart, or what they have or have not accomplished. If you have humility, then you see the potential to learn or gain wisdom from anybody. That is powerful. That is so powerful. Your educational diet will be rich and eclectic. You'll be absorbing new and fresh ideas from the ground up. You'll lead with vibrancy, and your ceiling will be practically limitless. All because you have humility. Okay, here's the second point. Humility removes pressure. Oftentimes, when you're the leader, people assume that you have all the answers. Many leaders feel this pressure to measure up to that impossible standard. Maybe you often think to yourself, man, if I don't have the answer, then how could they respect me enough to lead? I mean, isn't that kind of my job to have all the answers? Okay, let me tell you something. That is a big, fat lie. Please soak this in, okay? People will not follow your leadership because you have all the answers. Um, People will follow your leadership because they trust you. Okay, that is a big difference there. Let's really drill into this. Leadership is not built on how much you know, but on how well people trust you. Okay, you don't need all the answers. In fact, if you can't admit that you don't have all the answers, I'm not sure how you'll ever be able to lead effectively. It's not going to work out because you don't. And you're building your leadership on something that's not true, and that's not going to build trust. Here's a phrase I say a lot. It comes out of my mouth every single day, 10 times a day. I don't even know. And here's what I say. To be honest, I don't know, but I can find out. Okay, that should be in your arsenal of phrases that you say all the time. To be honest, I don't know. Then follow through. Go find out. Do your research. Hunt down an answer. See, that's what builds trust. You're not trying to pretend anything. I mean, you're not trying to fake it, but you do have the means to go find out. You'll go do your research. You will answer that question for them, or you will provide what they're looking for. And you know what else? It removes pressure. I don't need to have all the answers to be a leader. I just need humility. Okay. That is so powerful. All right, here's the next one. The next point is humility promotes teamwork. When you, as the leader, are actively pulling from the wisdom and knowledge of others, like we talked about, and you're not pretending to have all the answers, which was point number two, you get a very interesting and vital byproduct: teamwork. Teamwork. A humble leader is well aware that the sum of a team working collaboratively is so much better than the sum of a team working individually. You may have read about the interesting phenomenon with draft horses. I always thought this was fascinating. A single draft horse can haul up to 8,000 pounds, which is wild in and of itself. Now, you'd imagine that two draft horses could haul up to 16,000 pounds. That's twice as much, right? Okay, if one can do 8,000, two should be able to do 16,000 pounds. But that's actually not the case. Two of these horses can actually move up to 24,000 pounds, which is 3 times the weight one by itself can haul. And when the horses are actually trained together and they're used to working in tandem with each other, their pulling capacity, get this, can increase up to 32,000 pounds. That's 4 times more than either could have moved alone. That's the power of collaboration, of teamwork. It doesn't make any sense, but it's real. And any seasoned leader worth their salt knows that collaboration multiplies team output. And teamwork like that cannot be realized until humility is fully present, fully embodied. If each team member thinks that, they can do it on their own, that they don't need the team, that they have all the answers, they got to figure it out, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You've got to start with humility. You need each other. Identify the wisdom and the skills and the abilities in everyone on the team, and then use that together as a team. That's humility. The moment you humble your team is the moment they can finally realize their full potential. And that all starts with you as the leader. Okay, here's the next point. Number 4, humility makes you more approachable. Now, this is a good one, all right? A lot of leaders who are emerging don't even really realize that this is something that they're going to wrestle with. One of the unfortunate realities for a leader, if you've been in leadership for long, is that your team can start to feel uncomfortable around you if you're in that position. And your team may not always feel like they can relax when you're around, or worse, they may not feel like you're approachable. easy to talk to, or safe to be honest with. And that is really detrimental to your leadership because you need your team to be able to look to you in that way. Now, some leaders bring this on themselves with how they act. They really do. They're demanding, they're inconsistent, they react too strongly, they lead with fear, they have impossible expectations, or their team just doesn't feel like they're, I don't know, like able to be honest and open. They feel like they're walking on eggshells around their leader. Now, that's not what I'm talking about. If you're acting that way as a leader, then the issue is 100% self-induced, and you probably don't see the value in being approachable anyway as a leader, and that's a whole other conversation. But good leaders know the importance of being approachable. They know the value. However, even the healthiest of leaders can struggle to be approachable, to maintain that sort of relationship with their team. It can feel like swimming upstream sometimes. Let me tell you something. Humility is the key to this. It really, really is. All right. There are all sorts of concerns that can develop between a team member and a leader: the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of not being enough, the fear of sounding stupid in conversations. There's all sorts of things. Not to mention, the leader typically holds a certain degree of authority or control over the team member, and that can, in and of itself, create discomfort. So, humility is really interesting. It has a way of cutting through all of those things and reminding your team that you are all on the same level and that you value and respect what they have to say. And this makes your team feel safe. This makes you approachable as a leader. And it's so important that we see the connection between humility and people on your team feeling safe, feeling like they can be honest. And that approachability is going to really serve your team, and it'll serve you as a leader. Okay, here's the final point, number 5. Humility empowers the next generation. You know, the most outstanding leaders that I have ever studied or seen throughout history are the leaders who empower the next generation. You know, it's not just a blip, throughout our historical timeline. It is leaders who have led well in their lifetime, but also recognize that their legacy can continue and even improve after they're gone. These leaders know how to release leadership authority to the next generation. These leaders learned how not only to lead, but also to extend leadership authority to others. They create an environment where leadership roots grow down within the organization or within the infrastructure of what they lead or what they build. And the result is that the leadership continues and blossoms into something that stands the test of time. In other words, they leave a legacy, a true legacy. And I know that is something that so many of us really desire to spend our life doing. Leave a legacy. You know, the only way to pull this off is with humility. If a leader believes they are the only one with the skills, abilities, or knowledge to lead, they will ensure the eventual failure of what they're leading. They will. You just can't do that. That's pride. And it is a death sentence. And we know this because it happens all the time. We see it all the time. A leader just really, maybe had a lot of success in their life, but they just fumble it on the 1-yard line. And it's just tragic to watch. What a good leader needs to do is have humility. You know, a leader can certainly have a solid run, maybe even last a lifetime, but they will not see their legacy survive through multiple generations without humility. You can't empower other leaders, release leadership, and ultimately leave a lasting legacy without it. You've got to have it. Humility is at the core of it all. And that's how you get past just, I don't know, a season or a lifetime, and you get into something so much sweeter, so much richer. And that's a legacy. And I can't think of a better leadership goal than to leave a legacy behind you long after you're gone. All right, let's review. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. Humility promotes learning. It removes pressure. It promotes teamwork, and it makes you more approachable, and ultimately empowers the next generation to leave a legacy. You can't be a truly great leader until you embody true humility. All right. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. It's such an honor, such a privilege to partner with you as you go out into this world and lead and make an impact and make a difference. If you'd like to go deeper into all things leadership, you can check out my website, zachwhite.com. There's always resources there that can serve you. You can join the leadership community that I lead, and together we'll keep getting better at this. As I always say, keep fighting the good fight, and I'll see you again real soon.